Hi, welcome to the presentation We Make the World. I'm Gus Merkel. In the first part of this presentation, I'm going to do a review of the history of Maker. Then, I'm going to talk about the challenges we are facing today and discuss a little bit of the ideas of education and Maker. Then, I'm going to move forward to talking about the prototype development approach that I use to explain my students how to develop prototypes. It has some aspects of design thinking and also some aspects of a guideline that is used in the automobile industry. I'm going to start with the maker world. We started in the Stone Age being exposed to a lot of dangers. We had to hunt, we have to gather food, but we also have to be aware of predators and also a very harsh environment. What we did is develop tools. We found out that by sharpening stones, we could have very good tools. And also, we started developing communication. In the picture, you can see a horse in one of the first cave paintings. And I always tell my students that this is one of the great grandfathers of YouTube tutorials. In the cave paintings, the cavemen were able to tell stories and document the way they were living. So, in a way, they were kind of tutorials for other people going to that cave. They could see how they gather, how they live, how they hunted. And this is very important for my review on maker history because for me, the development of tools is also aligned and very close to the development of communication. Let's see, a lot of years later, with Johannes Gutenberg's invention of the printer, how this changed the whole world. Thanks to Gutenberg, uh, people that didn't have access to books now had access to them. This was a revolution for the whole world because they managed to democratize access to knowledge. Thanks to that, a lot of years later, we had the agricultural revolution. A lot of people had access to plans and diagrams on how to build tools that made agriculture easier. That agricultural revolution led some years later to the invention of the steam machine and also to the migration of a lot of people to the cities. Together with this migration, we started seeing a reshape on the society. A lot of people were going to the cities as factory workers. So again, we came to a time, to the Industrial Revolution, where 1% of the people was owner of the machines and 99% of the people were working in those factories. And a lot of years later, and it's funny that it's a revolution that we actually were alive when it happened, was the creation of internet. When internet started, a lot of historians called it the second Gutenberg. The same thing that happened with Gutenberg's printer is happening or happened with internet. Instead of having to buy a book, I could sit in India or South Africa, just write something, click upload, and then everybody in the world can access to it. So the question now is, where is this revolution heading at? If we say that the Gutenberg's printer took us to agricultural and then industrial revolution, and that shaped the way we manufacture products today, where is internet taking us in means of production? In this surreal painting, we see a man with a desktop. It's like a desktop factory, right? This is a metaphor for what we're seeing now with 3D printers. Today, with internet, we are able to access tools and build our own printers and manufacture at home. The utopia for a lot of us as makers is that in the near future we're able to produce products locally, but also that share or that fulfill local needs. So a lot of communities are solving problems using local manufacturing. So we're gonna experience a process of decentralization of production. Instead of producing everything in China or in Asia, we might see a lot of local production happening and also fulfilling in a better way the community needs. What are the challenges that we are experiencing today? Well, one of them is climate change. I mean, I don't think I have to talk about that. We just experienced the horrible situation in Australia with the fires, and we need to solve that. We don't have time. It's not going to be enough time to solve this. We also have a lot of problems, especially in developing countries, with the low interest in science, technology, engineering, and math subjects. Here we see a pie chart of Mexico, and we see that 44.17% of all the students are studying social science or management or law. So the big majority is studying something not STEM related. Even though we have this high interest for social sciences, management, and law, we do have a high interest in engineering, manufacturing, and construction, which is around 20%. But science, and that's very worrying, it's only 4.75%. Only 4.75% of the people starting a bachelor's degree are choosing sciences. And we're living, again, in a world with challenges that require more scientists. Another thing is automatization.
How long do you think it will take before machines do your job better than you do? Automation used to mean big, stupid machines doing repetitive work in factories. Today, they can land aircraft, diagnose cancer, and trade stocks. We are entering a new age of automation unlike anything that's come before. According to a 2013 study, almost half of all jobs in the US could potentially be automated in the next 2 decades. But wait, hasn't automation been around for decades? What's different this time?
As we heard in this video, automation it's been happening for a lot of years, but we used to think that only only very repetitive manual labor was going to be automatized by robots, and the reality is that it's not. Also, if you ask a pilot, 80% of the work he's doing to land an airplane is done by a machine. um, there were recent studies where artificial intelligence was better at diagnosing cancer out of pictures than real life doctors. So the automation is not happening only to replace worker labor. It's going to happen with a lot of jobs. So we have to prepare for that. There are some philosophers that say that we are actually on a race against the robots. We have to fight or work together with the robots. And also, a really big problem is the gender gap, especially in STEM. We see that if we look at, at math, or let's say engineering or computer sciences, we see that the percentage of bachelor degrees earned by women in the US is very low. Just in computer science is under 20, in engineering is around 15. So we have a very, very big problem. We have to make sure that more women, more girls are interested and are engaged with STEM, because we need everybody to work on the challenges mentioned before. And what has happened in the past years? Well, makerspaces have spread all over the world. Just in Mexico, and we have around 210 spaces. Here you see 46, but we have 210 spaces in schools. In Europe, you have over 681 spaces. And what's happening in those spaces is that people are changing the way we learn and we approach technology. Can we prepare our students to face the current challenges from the makerspace? And now we're going to start to talk about maker education, how a lot of philosophers, thinkers have tried to to approach this challenge. And we start with the constructivism from Jean Piaget. Jean Piaget thought that the principal goal of education in the schools is creating men and women who are capable of doing new things, not only repeating what others done. Men and women who are creative, inventive, and discoverers who can be critical, verify, not accept everything they are offered. With Jean Piaget, it was very clear that, or he made clear that knowledge can't be really transmitted. It's not about transmission of knowledge. It's about creating or having the conditions for your students to create the knowledge in their brain. And this is very important because it talks a lot about, or it says a lot about the process of thinking, how kids create their own knowledge. So a certain topic, it's going to be grasped and learned in different ways by different students. And that's a little bit the main point of constructivism. It's not about transmission of knowledge, it's about construction of knowledge. Jean Piaget received a letter from a researcher at MIT at the Artificial Intelligence Lab. This researcher asked Jean Piaget if he could join him for to study with him because he was developing machines and he wanted to know if Piaget, because Piaget was researching how kids learn, if Piaget could teach him how kids learn so he can develop computers that learn like kids do. Jean Piaget responded that he didn't like the idea, but he would accept to have this researcher with him if he changed the approach. Instead of creating computers that learn like kids, having him creating machines or computers that help the kids learn. This student was Seymour Papert. Seymour Papert was the creator of Logo, the programming language, and for him, the role of the teacher was to create the conditions for invention rather than provide ready made knowledge. You can teach people everything they need to know. The best you can do is position them where they can find what they need to know what they need to know. His philosophy is more centered to tools and environment. That's why it's called constructionism. Yeah, we agree with Piaget that knowledge can be transferred, it has to be constructed or built in your brain, but also the space and the tools are very, very important. One of his colleagues, Marvin Minsky, who was also part of the artificial intelligence lab at MIT, tried to summarize Papert's thought in a principle. He called it the Papert principle. And he said that it's not only about learning new skills. It's about new administrative ways to use what one already knows. And I always use the same example. Let's say aluminum foil. Normally, and I don't know, it depends on the country, but a lot of kids in Mexico, their mothers give them the sandwiches wrapped in aluminum foil. So kids might know aluminum foil as a sandwich wrap. But if you hook it to a makey makey and learn about um, conductivity and electricity, well, then suddenly aluminum wrap becomes a part of an electronic project. So for me, that's how I can explain this. It's not about new skills. It's about, hey, I know a little bit about aluminum. Oh, this also works for other stuff. And in the same way that Papert was studying with Jean Piaget, one of Papert's students, Mitch Resnick, also developed very interesting thoughts. Um, Mitchell Resnick created and is now the director of the Lifelong Kindergarten Institute at the Media Lab from MIT. For for Mitchell Resnick, the best way to help people understand the world is to provide them with opportunities to actively explore, experiment, and express themselves. I love the name Lifelong Kindergarten. That says a lot about the principal idea. Normally in kindergarten, you learn by drawing, by singing, by expressing yourself in a very active way. You also learn by playing. And as soon as you come to primary school, everything is forgotten. You have to start memorizing. You have to start doing charts and charts of different, I don't know, letters, etc. And suddenly, all the fun, all the play, all the expression goes away. So for Resnick, it's very important to keep those aspects. And in his latest book, he summarizes his thinking in four basic P's. He calls them the piece of creative learning, which I'm gonna go over in a minute. So again, just to summarize, what's the difference between constructivism and constructionism? Well, both agree that we have to create knowledge inside of our brains. Everybody is creating, not getting knowledge. We are building knowledge in our brains. But constructionism is more focused on tools and environment. And here I'd like to mention my favorite artist, Friedensreich Hundertwasser. He was born in Vienna in 1928, and he had this theory about the five skins. For Hundertwasser, as a survivor of the Holocaust, it was very important to express yourself in these five skins. The first skin was your epidermis, but it's also your values, who you are, your identity. Then the second one is the clothes, the things you wear. But that's also referring to the people near you, your partner, your kids. The third one is the house, but it also refers to your community, the people near you, your mom, your family, etc. And it goes wider and wider to four, the let's say your community, your home, the nature around you. And the fifth one is the nature in the world. One of the things he, for example, tried to establish is the idea of the window right. One of the phenomena that happened during the Holocaust and the fascist regimes in Europe was the suppression of any individuality. Everybody had to wear uniforms. Everybody has to live in this big big buildings without any expression of yourself. And he said that a way of expressing yourself is by painting your frame, your window frame, as you see in this picture. And I really like that idea because he said that it's a way of saying here, in this house, in this window, lives a human being. So going to the fourth piece of Mitchell Resnick, this idea of creativity, of individuality, is very, very important. The first P refers to projects. We have to work in projects, and that refers a lot to project-based learning, which is, I think, a lot. I mean, it's been there for a long time. Also, challenge-based learning. And what I like about projects is that it also talks about transdisciplinarity or interdisciplinarity. Normally, we were used to learn in divided by subjects at school, but when you go out to the real world, well, you see that the challenges we're facing are interdisciplinary. It's not that we go out and, oh, yeah, this is a math problem, oh, this is a Spanish problem, or this is an English problem. No, the world we live in, we have to face projects where with challenges that are interdisciplinary. The second P refers to passion, and this is one of the topics that I like the most. Passion is the driving force because if I'm passionate about the project, I will work harder and longer. Mitchell Resnick is also the creator of Scratch. I think you've heard about Scratch. It's this visual programming language that is very easy to learn. And actually, this morning I was working on some project to explain kids about what coronavirus is, which is a very, very current topic. And what Mitchell Resnick says about passion is that if you're passionate about the project, you're more likely to spend more time. That's what he calls the hard fun. When you're having fun with a project, but you're facing challenges, because you're having fun, because you're passionate about the project, you're more likely to stay on it and, well, get to a result. The third P is the peers. We share and we work with peers because learning is a social process. If you go to the literature, you can find, for example, from Vygotsky, a framework about how you can learn and develop knowledge and how to assess also learning by social interaction. So the fact that we world in an interconnected world and the fact that we have to start learning with peers is very important. Learning is not an individual process. It has an individual component, but we have to learn with peers. And the last P, it's about play. We encourage a playful approach to learning. Playing normally has been understood as not helpful, but now, for example, we know that a lot of animals, for example, they play, but they also play to learn. When we approach challenges in a playful approach, we are more likely not to have fear of these things. And I don't know, I related a lot to my personal experience at the engineering school and in the makerspace. I remember at school. In university, I had a hard time because the challenges we had were very serious. Our teachers were like, "Yeah, you have to solve this because at some point you're gonna be in front of a company and you're gonna have to. You can't afford to make a mistake, and everything is so serious and so funny because it wasn't real, but it's so serious. And at the makerspace, we allow ourselves to play and to use engineering, coding for our own projects and approach it with a playful approach. So I think this piece also very very important. If you're interested in reading more, the book is Lifelong Kindergarten: Cultivating Creativity Through Projects, Passion, Peers, and Play from Mitchell Resnick, 2018. It's available on Amazon and other shops online. Now I'm going to start talking about the prototype development approach. Everything starts with a problem, something like this. I think you got the point. all the problems, all the projects start with an initial problem. In the workshop, the teachers came up with different ideas. One was, for example, dogs, how to carry your dog in a motorcycle. That came from one of the teachers. She has, I think, three dogs, and she runs. She rides a motorcycle. So every time she wanted to take their dogs for a walk or to take them to the park, it was very hard for her because she couldn't take the dogs. They were big dogs in a motorcycle. So that was her problem, and that was one of the projects she wanted to tackle. Another one, she was a musician and she always had a problem with the bow of a violin because it was very hard to keep safe and it was very long. So she was thinking about creating a collapsible bow. Or another group of teachers decided to create an app to know where there's parking, where you can park on the street. Or, for example, a location-enabled smoke and fire detector. Like we start with ideas on post-its, and that's where we start our project. So, where are we at the design thinking process? Well, design thinking, there are a lot of different approaches to design thinking. One of the first ideas of design thinking started from the company IDEO, the company that helped develop the iPhone and other products. For them, the first step, and also, for example, the Stanford D School, they also have their own framework for design thinking. The first step is to empathize. We have to understand the consumers or the user's needs. I always tell my students it's hard to empathize with a problem that we don't really live. So we also start with let's say a process where we empathize, where we do research, where we talk to users and try then to go to the second step, which is defining what's actually the problem. One of the hardest parts for students is to really identify the problem. So in the definition part, we're going to start defining the problem. What we're going to see in this short presentation, it's more about the ideation, how we already empathized and defined the problem, and we start brainstorming ideas, but we also start creating the prototype and testing this prototype. For Mitchell Resnick, he uses this creative learning spiral, which I also like to compare it to the design thinking methodology. With the creative learning spiral, you start by imagining. For me, that's ideation, that's definition. You start imagining, thinking what you want to create, then you create, which is in design thinking the prototype part, and then you play. And I like that he writes play here because on the design thinking diagram we saw test, but it's the same. When you're playing, you're testing. This is step by step. You just build a bridge in the playground. Well, you're gonna test the bridge. If it falls, you're gonna build it again. So after playing, you share it with peers, reflect on it, and imagine again. This spiral is very cool because it's like a loop. You're always doing it again. You imagine, you create, you play, you share, you reflect, imagine, create, play, and so on and so on and so on. That's exactly why we use digital fabrication, for example, 3D printing, because with 3D printing, we make up a prototype and then we do it again and again until we have a final product. I have to say, for me, it's been a little bit hard to understand some parts of design thinking because I'm not a designer, but I do use it, but I also use some tools from the guideline from the VDI 2020-21. This is an association of German engineers, and they created this guideline that is used a lot in the automotive industry to develop new products. This is a very long process, and I don't really want to go very deep into it, but I'm going to show you three tools that I think are very important to start with. The first part is to clarify and define your product. And for that, we need a list of requirements. Here you see that. The list of requirements is very, very important. Here, you're gonna write down, for example, what's the cost? What's the minimum cost? What's the maximum cost? And in what unit you are measuring that. This requirement list could be filled by your user. So for example, if you're doing a prototype and you want to do, let's say, a cheap wash machine, well, you're gonna go and look for people that would like to buy a wash machine and ask them how much would you pay, or what would you think is the price, the maximum price a wash machine should have. So you have to empathize and also learn about your users and try to put those that data into this particular spreadsheet. The idea is that we can have a lot of requirements here, and then in the test part we can test if the product is really fulfilling those requirements. Another very typical requirement from my students is, for example, they always want to do portable things. I remember a student, he wanted to do a portable coffee maker. And I was in this part, I was like trying to make him clear what it means to be portable. Because if I'm a big person, if I am very very tall, well, for me portable could be some size. I don't know, a volume of whatever. And for a small person, as I am, it's a different thing. So you have to be able to put objective measurements here. So if you say portable, well, what's the maximum volume? What's the maximum volume it should take? If you say cheap, well, what's the maximum cost it should have? If you say it should last forever, well, we know nothing lasts forever, but we can say, okay, it has to last at least 2 years without maintenance, right? This is the part where we have to write down all those requirements. Then we're gonna go over to the second part. We're gonna call this the function tree. The function tree is where we have to explain what the different parts from our product are. So, for example, I'm gonna show you this video.
But it's up to you to decide which one it is.
This is a small research. If I would give you a minute to draw a bicycle, just out of memory, without looking at your phone or looking online, almost all the people come up with these four different bicycles. You have B, A, B, C, and D. If you see, from those four, only one is correct. Number D is correct. And it's very funny that I don't know about you, but I use my bicycle every day. It's actually in my living room and I see it every day. And even when I see it every day, it's hard for me to remember my bicycle. So I'm going to show you this video and I'm going to comment it afterwards.
Have you made your choice? Remember your answer while we see how these students did. It turns out that over 90% of our participants drew totally unrealistic bicycles. How can it be so hard for smart people to draw a simple bike?
So we've actually created these bikes here that reflect the most common mistakes that people make when they draw bicycles. You'll be happy to know that a lot of you guys match these perfectly.
Let's see if you can spot which bike is actually functional.
The first one is this white bike over here. All right, so Anne, tell me, here's your drawing. What's wrong with your drawing? What's wrong with this bike?
I have an extra bar there.
Which does what?
You can't steer the bike.
You can't steer the bike. So your prize is riding this mistake all the way down this campus.
Oh!
Okay, you don't have to do it anymore. Stop, stop, stop.
I was pretty confident that I'd be able to draw a bicycle, but clearly I didn't do so well.
Anne's bike looked like this. Option A. Is this the bike you picked? If so, you'd have a problem too.
Moving on.
Oh, no.
Lauren, can you tell me what your mistake was?
Well, it looks like it's backwards.
Yes. Are you surprised that you sort of messed this up?
I am. I'm
in
really
such a way?
surprised because my brain went, I know how to draw a bike. And I even added a bell on my picture.
There you go. Would you like to see her ride this bike? Yeah.
No, it's totally not working. I was so confident in my bicycle, I didn't even realize that it was backwards.
Lauren's bike looked like this. Option B. If you picked this one, then you'd be out of luck. So now we're down to two bikes. Dalton's bike looked like option C. Did you pick that one? That's incorrect too. It doesn't even have a place for pedals.
That's beautiful.
But if you picked option D, like Wesley's bike, then congratulations. You've been paying attention to your bicycle.
You have drawn a perfect bike.
What? I was like, what did I do wrong?
Oh, yes.
So what happened in the video is that they got to ride the bikes they draw, but the bikes they draw were abstractions of our memory. And if you draw a wrong bike, it actually is not wrong. It's good. It means that your brain is working. It's very healthy. In order to save memory and to save, let's say, space, your brain abstracts the objects. In this case, we see that from Picasso's hand. In these drawings, you see how Picasso starts with a very real bull, and as the drawings go further, he's abstracting. He's going from a very general drawing, a very real drawing, to the most important parts. At the last one, you see that the bull is reduced to the body, 2 lines for the legs, a line for the tail, and 2 lines for the horns, which is very, very basic. So abstraction is very important in these steps because we have to abstract what are all the parts that your project needs to do. So for example, with bicycle, you see a frame, but all the bicycle frames have the same functions. For example, A, well, that's the steering wheel. You need that to steer the bike to go right or left. You have B, which is the seat. You need something to support your weight and take you whatever you are going. You need D, which is where you generate, or let's say you pedal and you generate circular motion. And then you need C, which takes that circular motion and transfer or converts it into linear motion. That's what really moves you from A to B. And with those points, you can create all the bikes that exist in the world. The famous chopper bike, a mountain bike, a collapsible bike, a cargo bike, or the bike you see in down, which is a taco bike, is the basket taco bike, which in Mexico you see a lot and everywhere, and and they are very very famous because they're carrying these massive baskets. But the point here is that the all the bikes have the same functions. The frame, sorry, the shape is the only thing that changes, and that shape it's going to be modified by the requirements you have. Let's talk about a washing machine again. The main function of a washing machine is to wash clothes. In order to wash clothes, I have sub functions. So one is mix, shake clothes, and add soap and water. The other one is transport water. The other one is clean clothes. And the other one is retain or keep clothes and water. You see how we go from the general function, from the big picture, to the particular or to the principle. This is very important because if we are working um, in a project, we can also divide it into different groups. So let's say the project about the parking in the city. Well, parking in the city, in order to have an app that can tell you where to park, we need one part is, first of all, knowing if a car is parked or not. And that is more a hardware problem. But we also need a way of communicating that and showing that in the computer, which is an app problem. So the idea is to divide this principal function or this solution for your problem into different sub functions. It's important to say, but here, your product, I know what I have to do. I have requirements. I divided the different functions that my product has to fulfill. But the product, I still don't know how it looks like. And this is very important, especially with students. They always want to go to the part of, oh, yeah, I have the solution. It's going to look like this, it's going to have solar panels. We still don't have a shape. We know what the requirements, we know the functions that it needs to fulfill, but we still don't know how. So that's why we go to number 3, which is the morphological table. In the morphological table, we're going to put the functions we set with the possible solutions. For example, I'm showing a morphological table of a clock. It should be an alarm clock. The alarm clock has to show the time, have an alarm, tell me that I have to wake up, measure time, of course, and store energy. For example, to show time, I can use clock hands, I can use a solar clock, or an LCD screen. For the alarm, I can use a buzzer, a bell, or it can vibrate. Also, to measure time, I can do it mechanically with a spring. I can use sand, or I can use quartz. That's also to measure time. So sometimes when we don't, let's say we don't find those solution for each function, we can think a superhero. Like one of the exercises we can do is to say, for example, I'm gonna be Spider-Man. How would Spider-Man solve the problem of the clock? Well, maybe Spider-Man will go to your bed and just like throw you some spider webs. Or how would Batman solve the problem? Well, he might have a bad alarm clock, so I don't know. So the idea here is that you start. If you don't really have ideas, or your group doesn't have any ideas on how to solve the functions, well, you can put the cap of a superhero and try to think and be creative about that. And you might think, well, that's not very useful. I mean, I don't want to be a superhero, but this is a cool example that I like. In 1964, in the coast of Kuwait, the AI Kuwait transporting goats sank in the coast, and a lot of people were trying, a lot of marine engineers were trying to get this boat up because the goats that it was transporting, well, they died and began rotting, and the part where it sank was near the some water sources of Kuwait. So it was a very complicated problem, and they had to take the ship up. Carl Kroeber, an engineer, remembered reading in one of the DuckTales comic books about a similar situation where they managed to took out a boat from the sea ground using ping pong balls by putting ping pong balls inside of the ship filled with air so the ship can come up. So he remembered reading that comic book and applied the same principle. And some months later, they managed to get the ship up to the surface by using these ideas. So in the brainstorming phase, it's not about good or bad ideas. It's about as many ideas as possible. And then, as soon as we have 3 or 4 possible solutions for our product, we're gonna decide. So, for example, solution one could be a clock with clock hands using a bell to wake me up, measuring the time with a spring. Or solution two could be a clock that has an LCD screen, a buzzer, and measures time electronically using a quartz, a solar panel, and a battery. What we would do now when we have different solutions and combinations of functions and possible solutions is to go over to the list of requirements. Imagine for this case on the clock, we would say the clock has to be kid has to be ready for kids to read it. Well, maybe solution one is not suitable for kids because most kids have problems reading clock hands. So maybe solution two is more suitable for kids. So this is the part where you have different solutions and you go over to your list of requirements and start then the prototyping phase. On the next part, what I would do is to go over to my first sketch. With those documents in mind, I can start doing my first sketch, and I will show you here an example of a class. I normally have them doing either the sketch first or building it on plasticine or wood. So for example, here the students are creating a prototype for a phone holder. So here you see they have the plasticine and they are also sketching at the same time. And here we have different drawings. Some of them hate the rulers. In the middle we see a more square sketch. And then of course you can have also students that use perspective. 3 of these sketches are quite valid. Both show an idea. And this is very important. A lot of the students are scared of drawing. And it's not about being a super artist. It's about expressing ideas visually. Um, this is, for example, an experiment that I did on kindergarten where I tried to have kids playing with drawings, then going to 3D using Play-Doh. And then we go over to the lab, to the tablet, and we model virtually. So here you can see the process from 2D on paper with creations to Play-Doh to the physical to the digital version and vice versa. But some people also use cardboard. This is an example of a bike prototype. Some of our students did for a contest. They were showing a prototype of a bike using only cardboard and electronics. And you can also use Lego, which is also very fun. If you have some Lego lying around, you can use your prototype. I, for example, use wood. This is a prototype of a bike lock that I did using wood, and of course, this lock is just a concept. That's why I can use wood. But then I can digitalize it and 3D print it. I'm gonna leave it at this point, and have then a discussion with you. Thank you very much for listening. ¡Hora! ¿A dónde vas? No te pongas así. ¿Por qué te pones así, mi amor? ¿Por qué te pones así, mi amor? No, pues bien, pero pues este güey, pues su internet está pinche en África, güey. Se ve muy bien. Pero es palurda. Porque trae celeza, no.
¿Qué tienes? Mi amor, he perdido 4 horas del día, no puedo.
Pero tú eres preciosa. Palura, pero bella. Está chiquita. Preciosa. Ay, nada más.
¿Vas a seguir acá?
Aquí sí, me voy en 15 minutos.
¿A dónde?
A Proyectil, a una junta con Poncho. Junta con Poncho.